The next lecture we're going to be going over is Chapter 13, Section 2, Objectives. Explain cultural divisions in Western Europe. Number 2, explain the development of nation states. Number 3, analyze Western European countries. Number 4, examine artistic achievement in Western Europe. And number 5, describe features of modern life. As we discussed in the Chapter 13, Section 1 lecture, what we have is that we got Europe as a very large continent. It's kind of broken down into northern, western, Mediterranean, and eastern. Today we're going to be looking at kind of the western area. What we see here is that we see places like Germany, we're going to see the Netherlands, Belgium, France is also in this area as well. And so obviously with these countries you're going to go ahead and you're going to see a long history, very rich history. The big thing here is that when we look at the satellite map, as we do a lot of times, you're going to go ahead and see a lot of things here. First of all, you're going to see the green, dark green, that's going to be the vegetation. Obviously you're going to have the waterways here, which are going to lead to a lot of ability to trade and everything else. If we zoom out a little bit, one of the other things that we can see here is that we're going to see that it's going to be connected to a lot of different areas. Going to be connected to North Africa through the Mediterranean Sea, but we're also going to be able to see these areas right here are going to be connected to Asia. And so when we start looking at these western areas right here, they're going to go ahead and they're going to continue to trade really with all over the world. And so those countries become very rich, very powerful. These countries right here is what you've probably been studying when you start looking at things like World War I, World War II, and kind of how the United States has developed with them, because of course a lot of people come from those areas. So France, Germany are our region's largest, most productive countries. They strongly influence the cultures of nearby kind of smaller nations. France and Germany are going to have cultures that are strong in the Benelux countries. Benelux countries are Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Now, Rome is going to be conquered by Celtic tribes, so French is going to be considered to be a Romance language. Didn't conquer the German tribes, so German language is still going to exist, and that's where you're going to go ahead and you're going to see kind of that change and kind of that difference right there. The Germanic king Charlemagne is going to conquer the area in the late 700s. After his death, the empire falls into smaller competing kingdoms, which is very, very common, but that's where you're going to see different types of countries, small, big, just a bunch of different ones in this area. Now, one of the major things that we're going to see here is that in 1517, you're going to see Martin Luther's very, very critical 95 statements that launches what's known as the Reformation. Now, what the Reformation is that at this period of time, the Catholic Church is extremely powerful, and some are even going to say that they're going to be very corrupt. Martin Luther, one of the things that he really did not like was that the Catholic Church actually charged people to have their sins forgiven, charged them to get married in the Catholic Church, and Martin Luther really opposed this, and what he said was that no man should have to pay to basically be able to go to heaven. And so what he does is that he famously writes all his stuff down, and he's going to go ahead and he's going to put it on a church, and that launches that Reformation right there. And so what we see, and this is where if you look at this word right here, you're going to see Protestant. Protestant is protesting the Catholic Church. And so in Christianity, we really split it into two categories. We split it into Protestant and we split it into Catholicism. And Martin Luther, of course, is going to face some backlash from the Catholic Church. It's going to bring his excommunication, and then what we see is that a lot of people are going to follow, and this is where some people are Lutherans and they're going to follow his teachings. Now, today France is going to be mostly Catholic. The Netherlands, Switzerland, Germany all have Catholics and Protestants, and most German Protestants are going to live in the north, where the Catholics are going to live in the south. So what we see then is that we see that the rise of the nation states, and this is probably the thing that you've heard about in your other readings in your other classes. Now, first of all, we got to back up a little bit. The Middle Ages is going to be a system where they're going to use feudalism, and what we have here is that we really have three different levels. At the very top, you have the king. The king supposedly was given the power to rule over the people by God himself, and so what we see is that the king then has got power from religion. Underneath him is going to be the nobles, and these nobles are basically there to support the king and make sure that nobody comes and kind of takes him over. And then at the bottom of the ladder is kind of the peasants, and the peasants are going to be people that are going to work the land, and they're going to basically continue to give all of their taxes and give their money to the king, because the king actually owns the land under feudalism. Now, nationalism is going to develop. What nationalism is that it's a belief that people should be loyal to their nation. A nation is a people who share land, culture, and history. Nationalism is going to lead to the growth of the nation states. And so what we see is that nationalism is not so much about a group of people, it's about the country that you live in. The United States has a little bit difficult time understanding nationalism because we're part of the United States. We are Americans, but then we also put United States first. Other countries, for example, in Israel, you've got refugees that are Palestinians, and the Palestinians are the exact opposite. They don't worry about nations. They don't worry about the country. They worry about the group that they are. So nationalism is going to say, we want to grow the nation states. We want to have most of the power be in the hands of the government. Now, it's not a government system per se. It's just that they want to make sure that they're doing everything they can to be loyal to the nation. 1789, you see the French Revolution, which deposes a king and forms a republic. Napoleon Bonaparte then takes power, and we've talked about Napoleon Bonaparte in previous chapters, but he's going to try to conquer all of Europe. He becomes very, very close, and as some of you guys remember this story, he continues in to take over a bunch of areas, but when he goes in and he tries to take over Russia, it's too cold, and he basically is kind of defeated, and that's, if you've ever heard the phrase, it's his Waterloo. At the Battle of Waterloo is where Napoleon's going to be defeated. Now, what does nationalism kind of spark? European nations start to become rivals. What we see is that war breaks out repeatedly between France and these Germanic states. Germany unifies in 1871, and this starts to lead to a very, very strong German country. In the 1800s, industrialized nations are going to seek materials and markets, and they're really going to push for trying to become industrialized. You probably know where this is going right here. You see nationalistic rivalries. You're going to see competition. This is going to cause World War I. If you guys kind of recall the stories, a bunch of the countries have gotten together and they're saying that they want to make sure that they are protected by other countries, so they start to form alliances. These alliances start to develop into war alliances. The Allied powers, France is part of them. You're also going to see the Central powers, which is Germany and Austria-Hungary. Allied powers win World War I. And if you guys kind of remember the story, they basically put a bunch of harsh treatments on Germany. What had happened is that prior to World War I, Germany was actually a very powerful country. And they were becoming a very, very industrialized country. Manufacturing was very high, and they were becoming a world power. After they were defeated in World War I, when they started kind of dividing things up at the conferences, they started saying that Germany was at fault, and they started putting some very, very strict things on them. One of the first ones was that they weren't allowed to have a military, or a very strong military. It also caused a lot of economic problems because they were supposed to repay a bunch of the debts. And so what you see is that Germany really is struggling. You've heard about our Great Depression. Germany was in an absolute horrible depression. And then, of course, you can probably guess the next part of the story is that that leads Germany to becoming kind of unhappy with everybody else, and that's where they elect Hitler, and Hitler becomes that powerful dictator that tries to take over the world. Now again, the Nazis, they're going to go ahead, they're going to try to conquer Europe. Nazis are going to carry out the Holocaust. One of the things that's kind of a misconception about the Holocaust is that it is a mass murder of European Jews. That's what everybody understands about and knows. But another thing that you see is that people that were killed are going to be handicapped people, people that were gypsies, kind of refugee type people. And so a lot of these people are going to be exterminated, and the Holocaust is one of the worst things that has ever happened in the history of the world. The Allies do defeat Germany in 1945, and what you see then is that it's kind of a second chance to right the ship. When you start to see things like, guys like Truman, all of his guys, you're going to see Stalin, but they come together and they say, okay, what do we do to basically stop Germany from doing this again and stop any country from having another world war? And this is where you start seeing the United Nations develop. It's not so much about punishing Germany as it is making sure this will never happen again. Now, Germany is going to split into a non-communist West country and then the communist East country. And this is so magnified right here in Berlin, where Berlin is actually split in half. You've heard of the Berlin Wall. This is basically where you see the west part of it is going to be non-communist. The eastern part is going to be communist. And then what you see is that this is really the it's kind of the personification of all of the problems that go on between communism and non-communism, because in 1989 what happens is that the Berlin Wall is actually taken down and is basically opened up, and then Berlin basically is going to start to become more democratic and a little bit more united because of that. So again, what we see is that we see a country that is essentially kind of the focal point for communism versus capitalism, and then of course in 1989 the Berlin Wall starts to come down. Now, what have we seen with in terms of agriculture to high tech? What we see is that agriculture is important in Belgium, France, Netherlands, and Switzerland. However, coal, iron is going to be made in France and Germany, where the Netherlands is going to be industrial leaders. Today they have high-tech centers. Switzerland's neutrality makes it a banking center. What we're talking about there, guys, is that Switzerland does not choose sides. They are going to stay neutral. And what that means is that they are very much, people want to take their money to Switzerland because they know it's not going to be used against them. They know it's not going to have crashes. And so Switzerland is basically kind of the banking center of the world. You also see tourism very important in these areas. Obviously, with all of the historical background, people have lived there for a long period of time. You're going to see people coming there all over. But tourism is a major part of France, Switzerland, Austrian economies. You're also going to see in these areas kind of the luxury items, things like the German cars, the Swiss watches, French clothes, food, Dutch flowers. These are all considered to be luxury items, and they all come from this area. You do see, though, economic problems. Germany experiences cultural and economic difficulties after reuniting, and they become kind of a country that is kind of in between. They want to make sure that they never do what they did before, but they also want to make sure that they move on and become as industrialized as they possibly can. Next thing that we're going to see is we're going to see the music and painting. There is a long tradition of good music, great paintings in this area right here, especially kind of the classical music. People like Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, they're going to be famous German and Austrian composers. You're also going to see a lot of paintings here. Guys like Rembrandt is going to be Dutch. Ike is going to be Dutch as well. Monet is going to be one of the people that you see with the famous French painters. But again, there is so many of them that it's very difficult to break it down into just one small group. You're also going to see the city life of modern day life. Strong economies have started to develop in recent times. They're going to allow a very high standard of living. Most of Western European countries are going to have people that are going to be living in cities. What is this? Why is this important? Because good public transportation, cultural attractions are going to be very important. Very interesting in Europe is that they have a low crime rate. Usually when you you see bigger cities, you're going to see higher crime rate, and that's not necessarily the case. Most homes are small, and socializing is done in public cafes and parks. If you look at the where people live, the houses are very small, and they're actually kind of stacked on top of each other. Very, very, very common in this area. And so what you see is that people don't necessarily want to be in their house, they want to be out doing things. Recent conflicts in 1980, you're going to see guest workers from Yugoslavia, Turkey, they're going to go to West Germany. The economy is not doing very good, and you're going to see a large amount of racism, violence against these immigrants, and again, people in Germany kind of get looked at down because of the racism that's occurred. This is chapter 13, section 2. Please make sure that you complete your assessments.